Looks like we're getting a trickle of attendees connecting. Um, we're gonna wait a couple, maybe a minute or two after to see if we can get a little bit more people to connect, and then we'll go and start. In the meantime, we're just gonna enjoy this little slideshow that we have here. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us for a little panel and webinar, which is brought to you by Akaba and our sponsors. We have a great panel here who will help discuss a great issue that most of you are very interested in right now. I'm not sure how your screen is, but I'd like to introduce my panel based upon how the grid I have here. So to do the honors, I'd like to introduce Christina An. She's an attorney. She's an attorney search director for Parker Lynch Legal. She focuses on placing attorneys at law firms and corporate legal departments throughout Southern California. Prior to joining Parker Lynch Legal, she litigated national and boutique law firms and served as a law clerk for 2 judges on the DC Court of Appeals. Christina received her BA from UC Santa Barbara and her JD from UC Davis. She's licensed to practice in both California and the District of Columbia. She also serves on the board of directors for the Orange County Korean American Bar Association. Thanks for joining us, Christina.
Thank you for having me, Larry and Okaba.
Okay. And next on my screen, I have Charles Lin. Charles is an attorney in the private client service group at Bryan Cave Leighton Paisner LLP. He counsels high net worth clients on tax and estate planning issues, both domestic and international. Charles is also an integral part of the firm's private client practice in the Asian Pacific region and frequently works out of the Hong Kong office. Charles graduated from Loyola Law School in 2008 during the heart of the Great Recession. He also obtained a tax LLM from Georgetown University in 2010. Charles is a member of his firm's Irvine office recruiting committee and participates in recruitment and mentorship of each incoming class. Thanks for joining us, Charles.
Thanks for having me.
And next on my screen, I have Robin Apodaca. Robin is a professional with over 16 years of law school career services experience. She currently serves as Director of Career Services for Chapman University, Dale Fowler School of Law. Prior to joining the Chapman Fowler School of Law, Director Apodaca served as the Director of Career Development at the University of Laverne College of Law and Senior Assistant Director of Career Services at Southwestern Law School, where she was responsible for providing a full suite of professionalized services to law students and alumni while helping them create, execute, and meet career goals and objectives. Her current duties include working under the direction of Assistant Dean Park to develop and implement strategies for career advising, employer outreach, and programming services, meeting with and advising law students and alumni, and fostering and maintaining relationships with current and prospective employers. Thanks for joining us, Robin.
Happy to be here.
And last but not least, we have Delora Hughes. She has a wealth of experience in clinical education. Prior to coming to UCI in July 2016, she was Director of Clinical Education at Wayne State Law School, where she was responsible for oversight and development of the clinical education program, including 7 live client clinics and 4 externship programs. Prior to this role, Professor Hughes was Associate Director for Clinical Education and Director of Externships at Wayne State Law. She has also held academic positions at the University of Arkansas School of Law, Fayetteville, Case Western Reserve University School of Law, and Whittier Law School. Previously, she practiced law as a Deputy Public Defender for the Orange County Public Defender's Office in California and as a staff attorney at the AIDS Legal Assistance Project at the Law Foundation of Silicon Valley. She holds leadership positions on the board of directors for the Clinical Legal Education Association, CLEA, and executive committee for the Association of American Law Schools, AALS, section on balance in legal education. Thanks for joining us, Delora.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Great. So everyone, we planned for this panel to be very interactive. And so don't be shy to ask questions using our Q&A function. And the questions can or don't have to be related to the topic at hand. If our group here, the Pipeline Committee of OCABA, consisting of me, Larry Valdez, Jerry Wong Williams, and Sabrina Lee, will be monitoring your questions and trying to direct them to our panelists, likely during the topic that we're talking on. Hopefully the questions are related, but if they're not, we are reserving a couple minutes after for our Q&A. So don't fret, we're gonna try to get to all your questions as soon as possible. And also don't be shy. So to start off our panel, I'd like to have the panelists talk about what they're seeing today in the current landscape of the job market. Our panelists consist of a broad spectrum of the legal community, being an attorney, Charles, who graduated during the pandemic, or I'm sorry, the Great Recession in 2008, to law recruiters, Christina, who's a law recruiter, and Robin and Delora, who are part of the academic part of helping students secure job positions in the future. So based upon your experience now, how do you see the current landscape of the legal job market? Anyone?
I can start, I guess.
Mhm.
So I think clearly the similarity is, both are Black Swan events, things that you didn't expect to see during your lifetime, but it's happened. The fear is certainly the same. Fear that I'm feeling from students and would-be attorneys, and also fear within the law firms. I think at least as we stand in late June, the attitude is more positive than it was in 2008. From the law firm side, I know internally we are a lot more positive. Back in 2008, it was right around, it was in the summer where, my friends and now colleagues and I were, that's when we were, the deferral notices and retractions and, hey, guess what, you're not gonna have a job when you finish the bar exam. That started trickling during the summer, right when we were studying for the bar exam. And I don't think the reaction from the law firms has been quite as severe. I think a lot of, most firms are kind of in wait and see mode right now. And certainly my firm is. If you fall above the law or whatever, I think most firms are taking certain cost-cutting measures and being more, fiscally conservative towards the end of the year. But I think generally the sentiment is more positive. I think people are hoping for a V-shaped recovery because I think Q1 was extremely positive for most firms across the board. And so they're hoping, once we get a vaccine, everything will be, snap back into place. Remains to be seen whether that's the case. But I think for now, people are pretty positive. And then certainly in June, financials seem to be better than it was in May and April. But again, jury's out. So yeah, that's what I have to say on this. I mean, I can talk so much more about this, and Christina can probably talk more about job postings and whatnot. But I remember, like, you can do I mean, people were looking for jobs on Craigslist. There were $12 an hour attorney postings back then in 2008. So I haven't seen that yet. I just did a search. Salaries seem to be okay so far. That's just me.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm happy to weigh in. Thanks, Charles, for that. So pre-COVID, the market was really hot. You know, lateral associate hiring volume actually increased by 22% from 2017 to 18. And so a lot of firms had a pretty rosy outlook on 2020. In fact, you know, 83% of Am Law 100 firms expected to raise their rates this year by more than 3%. But, you know, with COVID happening, you know, March showed a loss of 1,700 legal jobs. And in April, the legal sector, broadly speaking, showed a net loss of 64,000 jobs. But, you know, really interestingly, and on a positive note, employment overall surprisingly rose 2.5 million in May, and the jobless rate declined to 13.3%. So that was very heartening news. And unemployment in California is a little bit higher. It's about 15.5%, but a vast majority of that is in hourly, retail, and restaurant, about 84%, whereas professional services, under which legal falls, is at about 3 to 4%. So as Charles mentioned, I think one of the big differences this time around versus the Great Recession is that a lot of firms have learned their lessons from the Great Recessions, and instead of completely like eviscerating summer classes and whatnot, they've just made adjustments this time around, maybe a shorter summer program period, perhaps, you know, going remote instead, things like that, and doing also like pay cuts, distribution changes, and furloughs, in addition to summer associate program cut or changes, instead of going outright to layoffs, which I think was the more initial mode of reaction the last time around in the Great Recession.
Thanks, Christina. Robin, how have you found that the legal job market is for your students and placing them or helping your students find jobs at this time, or even during the beginning of the pandemic? I know it kind of hit us at the end of the school year, so there was a lot of worry about summer jobs and such. So how did you find that affected?
Well, honestly, so when everything started happening, what I noticed, and I had the opportunity to advise students in 2008, 2009, 2010. And so what I think is different and what I see differently is that people pivoted much faster, where, you know, the employers pivoted faster, and I think the law schools did as well. I was on so many phone calls and Zoom meetings and Microsoft Team meetings when this was all happening to try to see if we can save jobs. And that was the first thing we did. So we immediately, and I know other law schools did the same, because I've been on national phone calls, I've been on regional phone calls to see how we are going to deal with this. And what we've done is everyone immediately reached out to students and saying, do you have your job? And while we had quite a few students, I wouldn't say quite a few, but a few students not have a summer position, meaning their summer positions were rescinded, we were able to place them in other areas. So the market is, you know, it may be lagging in some practice areas, but in others it's picking up. So I've noticed that. I've noticed in speaking with employers, we're having a recruiting program this fall, and we still have 50 plus employers on the roster. So there are positions out there. I just think that, you know, with everything that's happening right now, I think students really need to start thinking about the skills that they have and how they can kind of spread around how they're going to be working and in what areas.
And Larry, if I can, I'd say too, just to add, I agree with everything that my co-panelists have said. And I would say too that it's really been, I think a pleasant point is to see everybody really come together to figure out how best to support students so that students were not left behind in this process. As Larry mentioned, this hit in the middle of a semester, and then we were transitioning to summer. Even now, just last week, we had a government agency reach out and said, we're so sorry that we weren't able to bring you in at the normal time frame, but we've created a 4-week training program for you. If you'd still like to join us, please do. That's kind of unheard of, right, in past years. And I don't think I didn't see things like that in 2008 and in the subsequent years. I'd say in the public sector though, so with government agencies and with legal aid orgs, a little bit of where we're at is still a bit of a wait and see. So there was a huge push initially to actually get more help because there was a need there for the new work that was coming in. And now folks are trying to kind of maybe take a beat to figure out what's coming next. And of course, and I'm sure we'll talk about this at different points throughout this webinar, but the big question of the day is the bar exam as well. So for many of those jobs, right, it's a bit of a wait and see about when the bar will be administered, when results will come out, before those jobs will even be available, especially in government agencies and in legal aid and the PD's office, et cetera. So that's a bit of a different ball game than I think on the law firm side, though that's affected as well.
Thanks, Delora. And kind of similar topic, but moving on a little bit, because of the pandemic and people pivoting, have you noticed that there has been any shifts in different areas of law, that there are more jobs available? Have you noticed that there have been more postings for online companies or different sectors, or have you been able to fill or find jobs for potentials in particular sectors considering the pandemic now? Let's see if Christina could
Sure.
show something of that.
Sure. I think bankruptcy was already starting to pick up towards the end of last year. We're definitely seeing the trend that it's going to continue to pick up this year. Litigation was our #1 placement area last year. I know the courts have been on hold, but we're starting to see that pick up as well as the courts start to reopen. Interestingly, I think at a lot of like the smaller boutique type of firms, we're seeing a lot of movement as well in litigation, for example, in like insurance defense and, plaintiff side work as well, which typically of work, we don't typically see a ton of that, but we're starting to pick up more. Data privacy, in particular, with the GDPR and CCPA compliance, was already starting to pick up last year. We don't see any indication of that slowing down, especially in-house. I read an article today about how if you are a data privacy attorney and you go in-house, even right now, you pretty much have job security, and if you get laid off, you'll get picked up by a company pretty quickly. So that's an area as well. Healthcare was already starting to pick up last year, even more so this year with COVID. And also patent work, and not just patent attorneys, but also with patent agents. My team and I are working on quite a few patent agent searches. In Orange County in particular, historically, it's been more in the EECS space, but we're also seeing an uptick in med device work as well now. So that's really good. And then labor and employment, of course, with all the compliance issues with COVID. Labor and employment has historically been in our top 5 placements, and this year we don't see any indication that it's going to slow down at all. So labor and employment litigation, and also counseling advising.
I would just add housing to that list. As I think we're seeing more folks reaching out, a lot of grants coming through for agencies in that area, and assuming that budgets hold to some degree, I think there will be hiring, additional immigration hiring, of course, for lots of agencies, and then also in the criminal sphere as well. There is a huge backlog of cases. They are going to need additional folks to work in those areas. The only question there, as jobs come through, is whether county entities, state entities, and then of course the federal government that the funds will come to follow those positions. But we're seeing some additional postings in those arenas. And I think for students or recent grads, or maybe even laterals particularly interested, I think housing will be a very hot topic for the next few years as well.
Yeah, estate planning for us. The last couple of days, we've had a huge uptick in estate planning positions for law clerks and for attorneys. So that's another area.
Thanks, everyone. And even though there's an uptick or some certain fields that are looking for candidates, have any of you seen the possibility of contingent offers? Or, we talked about, or Charles talked about, he got emails of jobs being rescinded. But something related probably is because of the bar being in September now, California bar being in September, some offers are contingent upon them passing the bar, or contingent upon certain work conditions. With Charles being on your firm's recruiting committee, have you seen any of these contingent or something related to the hiring in these certain sectors?
Yeah, I think most, at least for big law, for large firms, I think many are postponing the start date for their would-be first-year associates. A lot of it is just, well, the bar exam's not going to go on a schedule in July, and it's delayed and maybe delayed further depending on the pandemic, right? So I think that's something in flux. I think the intent is, at least for my firm, is by any means necessary to hold on to your first year associates. The thinking is always long term. We don't know what the market's taking a dip right now overall, but we don't know what's going to be a year from now, right? And when they take the bar exam, let's say they take it in October, they might not get results till January, February. Again, we don't know. There might be a vaccine by then, whatnot. So, when you say contingent, really, it's just playing it by ear, and just trying to, do everything we can to hold on to our, incoming first-year attorneys, because firms did invest a lot in them, right? A whole summer program was devoted to them prior, and it would be a really huge cost to just say, okay, sorry, you no longer have a job, we can't hold on to you. So I think the sense is that even if there is not necessarily going to be a bunch of work available for a first year associate coming in, the intent is, well, we still want them to come in because there will be work available down the road, and we don't want to lose them.
Thanks, Charles. Also, we mentioned part of the pivoting from these potential employers are the possibility of remote jobs. And how often have you seen or had employers just caveat that if they're going to be hiring this potential applicant, right now it's going to be remote because of the current situation? And how often had you seen that? How about hey, Robin, have you ever had to place someone with a remote position yet?
Yes, we've placed plenty of students and graduates. So the positions that are all coming through the office right now are all remote, most of them. And if they are going to transition, we contact the employer and ask them, is this a temporary remote? Is this, as full-time remote for the duration? Because that's something, that actually needs to be discussed in the legal field. Is this a position where I can actually have my employee work from home indefinitely? So those are some interesting questions that are being raised, but most of the positions are remote unless they're working for the courts, or if they're getting a position with a judge, then that's a different ball game, and whatever the courts are doing, they have to adhere to that as well. But for the most part, they have been remote, and we have had a few that are remote and then temporary start. So it's we need you for now, you will be working remote. And then there's also, you're working remotely until you know, things change. So.
And I'd say too, that's a big takeaway right now. I agree with Robin. It's a huge takeaway that if you are out there either negotiating a lateral move or you're negotiating that first job, you've really got to get clarity on those conditions and how long they are, et cetera. That's not stuff that can wait. Even if you are in a position that you're feeling a little bit desperate, right, that we've got to get that job and lock it down, you do not want to find yourself in a position to have accepted something and then suddenly be like, well, I'm in DC, they're in DC, and suddenly you're like, oh, it's they're expecting you to relocate. So just make sure you're getting clarity on that. And whether if you're a current student or an alum, right, or a recent graduate or a longtime graduate, reach back out to your career services office and or if there's recruiters that you know or you're connected with to get advice on how to navigate that. So having a second person, second set of eyes, second set of ears on the tone, how you might ask the question, how you might bring it up if it's not been brought up, I think is good. And you're not alone in trying to navigate that part of the process and realize that this is all really new. So we haven't done this before, and employers are new at it too. So you're not the only one on the receiving end that doesn't 100% know how it's going to go down. So recognize that they might still be figuring out it as well and don't have all the details worked out. And we're seeing same thing. I'd say one silver lining, if we're trying to be a little positive, is that it has been great for some students to be able to access positions and opportunities that they wouldn't really have had the opportunity to take on were it not for them being remote. And we're also, I think, seeing some agencies, particularly on the government side, really exploring the idea that more people can be remote or can be distant than they otherwise would have been open to. So I don't want to go super Pollyanna on it, but that does feel at least like a silver lining to some of what's happening is folks are exploring those pieces in a way that they haven't been before.
Thanks, Laura. So we've talked about the legal market now and the difference between now and 2008. So what can potential, students or people wanting to make a shift into a different field of law, let's move the topic to what they can do now to help them secure a position. So let's start maybe from right out of law school. What can new graduates or new people taking the bar do to set themselves apart during their job search or applications?
So I just jump and Robin, please join me in this mix. What we always talk with students about is transferable skills. So if you're not able to do the thing that you particularly want to do or the thing that's directly on point with the track that you anticipated, what are other gigs, other jobs, other things that you could do that are transferable so that you can talk about in that job interview, right? So it might not be directly on point, but it's still litigation skills, right? It might not be in exactly the same substantive area of law, but you've had some experience doing, something very similar, interviewing, client counseling, things that fit and transfer, as we would say, to a lot of different types of positions. The other thing right now I'm talking with students about, especially if you are in a position that maybe your summer program, as Christina said, either didn't happen or got shortened, it's a great time to go grab a new skill. So take that online mediation course that you are not going to have time for later to add to the resume. So I would say it's also a really great opportunity to do some self-reflection, to figure out, looking at your resume, looking at where you'd like to go, doing a good self-assessment about what skills do you have that you can work on to improve versus what you're missing. Pro bono work can help to do that, to fill in that gap. There's a lot of need out there in a lot of arenas. Reaching out, it's a great time to reach out to mentors and other folks. One of the things that we are seeing in our classes and in some of our like speaker opportunities, et cetera, we are getting speakers to come and talk with our students who we would not be able to get under normal circumstances because folks are more available. So the same seems to be true for students reaching out to potential mentors, additional networks. It's a good time to reach out to folks and ask those questions. Do a 15-minute, 20-minute coffee via Zoom, or just a phone call works as well. But I would say the big thing is self-assessment, and then figuring out those transferable skills. What can you take with you? What do you already have? And then what could you go get in other forums that will transition well into what you want to do? Robin, similar?
I completely agree. And it's what we've been telling our students and graduates. So when you're drafting your resume, obviously you want your hard skills to come through. When you're drafting your cover letter, this needs to be a combination of your hard skills and your soft skills, right? We all know this when we're writing our cover letters. However, with the possibility, and we know that it's almost a fact, you'll be working remotely if you get a position now. What are some of the things that employers are looking for in soft skills in people that they're going to hire, right? I'm glad that you can do the things that I'm going to ask you to do them, but how are you going to do it? Do you have the ability to work independently? Are you goal oriented? Are you motivated? Can you communicate clearly? If I email you, how long is it going to take for you to get back to me? So all of these things need to be properly represented in your cover letter, because now you're looking for more than just somebody coming into the office and working 9 to 5. I need to be able to connect with you. I need to be able to communicate with you. So I think that's important. I agree with the Zoom calls and reaching out. There's so many ways now. What I like about what's happening is that we are utilizing technology to reach more than just the people that we can actually go to see. And it opens up a lot of opportunity for mentors. It opens up opportunities to network with people from all over the world. So I think you should take advantage of that. If you're really looking to get into a field, if say you're going and you're searching for positions and you cannot find somebody, or you cannot find available positions in your field, you can always reach out to someone. And it does not have to be anymore someone who's in your own backyard or the next county over. So I definitely think you should take advantage of the remote collaboration tools that we have all become so adept in recently, and definitely think about those things when you're applying. So you got your cover letter that needs to be updated. You should also update your resume with little things like, the remote collaboration tools that you're available to use. If you have any technological skills, now's the time to put it on your resume as well, because employers need to know. If we have a client meeting, if we're meeting with someone, are you able to run this meeting? Do I need to do Zoom conferencing? How are you going to behave? Professionalism is something else. I have seen it with my own 2 eyes, people getting onto Zoom meetings and just being unprofessional just because it's from their home. You need to be able to communicate that you can be professional in all circumstances.
And I would add too, if you've got I think our CDO likes to say elevator pitch, right? One thing to add to how you're marketing or selling yourself is how you adapted, and whether you were flexible and nimble and a part of the problem solving for all of this. People are going to want to hear how you handled this whole, as Larry said, the situation that kind of hit us out of the blue in the spring semester. So I think students can really speak to and talk about the skills that they gained from having to be very flexible and nimble in making that transition, and how they assisted or supported their agency, their school, their classmates, their colleagues in making that transition, right? So there are stories to be brought out and told, and there are skills to be highlighted, I think, from these experiences, even if you are, as Robin said, not working in your particular or chosen area.
Thanks, everyone. So the theme looks like building more skills to make you a little bit more marketable. We've always kind of focused on that in law school, or even transitioning to other works, is how can you fit into this new job that you're looking for, and looking for those skills that an employer will want in a potential candidate. Some other ways that I found that will make you stand out in to employers is networking. I know networking was a big part of the employment process. Some people have gotten positions that they probably never would have had without networking. And now it's a crazy time. There's the 6 feet rule, and limiting on people, gatherings of people. So how should someone, or how have you seen people networking during these times? There aren't really any in-person functions, but I've seen networking functions out there on Zoom or other formats. Just not aware of all of them. So how do we keep our networking up? Christina, do you have something for that?
Sure. I think now more than ever, it's important to not be shy regarding strategically asking people that you trust for help and guidance. So this could look like, potential references for positions that you want to reconnect with, trusted professors. And then you want to leverage social media like LinkedIn as much as you can. And you want to stay flexible during this time and realize that your networking might end up being virtual. And so if you can leverage video technology like Zoom, so it's more face-to-face versus via phone, I think that always helps a lot, particularly if it's someone that you don't know very well, but you're trying to strengthen a relationship. And then also, if you are, if you stay open-minded and flexible about, a lead might lead to a lead. So maybe you look on your LinkedIn and you see somebody whose career trajectory you really admire, and you want to talk to them further about how they got to where they are and how they accomplished that and what their roadmap was. And then, you talk to them and you set up your Zoom interview, and it turns out, they, in talking to you, maybe they themselves don't have something for you, but you really remind them of, they're somebody else they know in their network that they want to make an introduction to you for. And so I think just staying flexible along those lines too, and realizing that your networking might mushroom out, and you might have to keep going at it, but it'll all pay dividends in the end.
Yeah, I'll chime in here. Completely agree with Christina. I think, I don't think it's been mentioned, but update your LinkedIn profile, especially for law students and younger attorneys. So every student I interview, and I probably interview between 15 to 25 a year, I always go to their LinkedIn page, and I would say over 50%, it's like some picture from high school with a diploma, a hat, a graduation cap and gown on it. So update it. Because when you do online networking, people are going to look you up even more so than just someone you run into at a gathering, right? They have time to do their due diligence as they're chatting with you. Right now, I can pull you up on my computer. So make sure that's updated. And then I think I think what Christina said about not being shy, completely agree. I think since the lockdown, everyone's been trying to do Zoom calls, Zoom happy hours, whatever, and all of that. I would suggest that when you ask to connect with someone, you can leave it more open-ended. So I've had a few in-person meetings with people, but it's been like on a park bench. I had an outdoor lunch on a park bench. We were like 10 feet apart with a financial advisor I work with. So you could say, hey, we can do a Zoom coffee or a call or something like that. Or, I understand everyone has different risk tolerances, but I'm happy to do an outdoor, meeting or something like that. And I think, some people might take you up on that, and it might be refreshing in this day. And
one thing, go on.
Go ahead. No,
I was just going to say one thing that I thought about as well, that I remember a former GC of a Fortune 500 company told me that, she gets a lot of requests from people wanting to network with her. And she said it helps tremendously when people are specific about what they want to talk to her about ahead of time, almost like an agenda, right? Yeah. And I know sometimes you're like, oh, I want to keep it open-ended and see where this goes. But she's like, you don't understand how much I appreciate it when people are just really upfront with me and just tell me like, hey, I want to talk about these things. Like, what are your thoughts? And she's like, it just makes my life a lot easier. And the onus really is on the person who's asking for help to be that clear and concise and direct.
Yeah, and I was going to say the same thing, Christina. And as a professor who receives a lot of requests, right, for this letter, and can you do that, and can you write that, or B, whatever. It's okay, first of all, to not give me, I don't need 2 paragraphs of you missed me and blah, blah, blah. It's okay just to ask me and for what you need. The other piece is, I love Christina's point about, I think it was either Christina or Robin who said, now's a great time, if you don't need anything, to reach out to people where you're just checking in. How are they doing? I thought of you. So that you're not, for those people that you really want to keep on your list as references, that you're not just always reaching out when you need something. And a good friend many years ago who I went to law school with is fabulous at this. And of course, now he lives in DC, so because he's really fabulous at this. And he actually calendars the follow-up, right? So that too much time doesn't pass between checking in. Like if I want to, if I've got great contacts with Christina, I'm not going to go more than X number of months without sending a check-in right to her. So to that end, I would also suggest that if you're taking Charles's advice and Christina and Robin's advice about reaching out and following up and setting appointments, you should be tracking in some way who you're talking to or who you sent requests to. So whether it's a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet or something, you don't want to be sending duplicative requests to people that then become very generic. And I absolutely agree. Please, please, please tell people what it is you specifically want. If you want to talk to them, I was really impressed with how you got to that position. I would really love to hear about your roadmap and your plan and what advice that you could give me to become an X, rather than, hey, I'd just like to meet you. I think is super helpful. And also then can clarify the amount of time that person feels like they need to spend. And they may even be able to then say to you, that's not me, right? I'm not going to be able to help you with that, but here's the person I suggest you talk to. Let me introduce you. And I think that, as Christina said, that second level connection can be as important, if not more, than the person you originally reached out to.
I 100% agree with Delora, Christina, and Charles. All of this information is perfect. It actually just took the words right out of my head. And I will say, when Christina said to have the agenda, that's actually important even when you're speaking to your supervising attorney when you're working. Have an agenda when you walk into their office. Know what you want to talk to them about, what your questions are. Don't just walk in and say, well, I was thinking, because time is money. We all know this. It doesn't matter if you're at home or in the office. So that's really important. To add to everything that was said, don't forget to follow up with a thank you. They've taken the time to speak with you. You've reached out to them, and in some cases they're strangers. You've never met them before, and they responded and you had a great conversation. Don't forget to just send a thank you letter or even a note, thanking them for their time. And that's where you further your conversation. That's where you get that second ask, where you say, is it okay if we meet again in a couple months? So it's building these foundation of contacts that you can do from your home, or, obviously when things get back to some semblance of normal, you can meet them in person for coffee, like they said. So take advantage of these opportunities.
Thanks. And just playing off of that, everyone has mentioned, just don't be shy, be bold and go for it. But have you noticed, or what would your opinion be about, say, cold call emails out there? You see a position on LinkedIn or on these job sites, and you have maybe a second connection to this person, or you met them a long time ago, never really followed up. But under these circumstances with the pandemic, what are your opinions on email introductions / cold calls? Are they acceptable now?
I'll take it, I guess. I think it's always been acceptable in my mind. And I think now even more so. And especially if you see it, like the example you brought up, a job posting, you'd see as many ins as possible, right? In a more challenging job environment, job search environment, you just got to take advantage of everything at your disposal. So that's second and third party connections, people you've met before, people you haven't met before at all. And on that point, I'll say one thing. Things don't seem to be as bad as they were in 2008. But in 2008, I would say that if you are looking for a job, it pays to be vigilant. So I was lucky enough to eventually land on my feet with a plaintiff's employment law firm in Century City. This is between my JD and my LLM. And shortly after I was hired, we were looking for another associate attorney. And we put up the posting and within 2 hours received 100 resumes. We looked at the first 20, interviewed 5 or 6, hired 1 person. We didn't even look at the other 80, and we looked at them in the order that they came in, right? So again, things aren't nearly as dire, but if you are actively looking for a job or a new job to lateral to, and especially if you're in a sector that's not, you know, doing too hot right now, you want to be vigilant. You don't want to just look at job listings in the evenings, or when, you know, you want to check in a couple of times throughout the day on multiple platforms. So anyways, just wanted to say that.
If I could jump in, yes, I agree. My expert experience and, you know, advice is do it, do that, do the cold calls, do the cold emails. It shows enthusiasm, right, for the position. Not only did I see your position, I am applying. I'm just calling to reiterate my interests. I have people, you know, I've talked to people who work with this firm. I'm interested in this. I mean, it's really important that you do that. And to go back to what Charles said, carve out some time in the week. Know that these are the days that I'm going to be looking for jobs. I'm going to look at these websites. I'm going to be sending out I'm going to have all my materials ready. Carve out time for yourself, because it's really easy to get through the entire week and only look for jobs or only apply to 1 or 2 things. As Charles said, it was competitive in 2008, 2009, 2010. It's competitive now. So take time and give yourself time, and it will be less stressful because you're not applying at the very last minute because you just saw the position and it's closing that day.
And I would just say too, in addition to reaching out, of course, we're talking about networking with people that you don't know, right? Or you're trying to build that network. Also tell the people in your current network that you're looking. Like, you may feel a little embarrassed. Maybe there's shame associated with this. You got to let that go and let people know that you need help. And reach out to them. So not because they can specifically go find you a job, but if they hear of something or see something, maybe they'll send that to you or forward that to you, or I can connect you to another person that I know who's got experience or history in that area. If people don't know what you need, they can't help you. So I think that's the other piece. That's the part of as Larry said, that's the part of the be bold, is that it's not a time to sit in your living room in front of a computer and just be sad all by yourself. You've got folks that will help you, whether be sad with us, right? We'll be sad with you. Whether it's, as Christina said, former trusted faculty, it's career services administrators, it's former colleagues, other law school grads, it's bar association people that you've networked and made connections with. That reach out also, I think, even if it's people you've gotten to know a little bit, this is also a time, this kind of shared tragedy builds and breeds intimacy. It is a time to build that connectivity over this shared experience. So not only knowing that you're not alone, but letting other people know truly what you need and what you need help with.
Thanks, Laura. And related to that, we have an audience question is, once you reach out and make that connection, what are everyone's advice for maintaining that connection or even building it during these times before we would have in-person meetings and say, hey, let's go get some coffee? What can they do now to maintain or even develop these connections after you've made them?
I think just staying on the radar and whatever system you use in place. I think Delora mentioned having like an Excel or Word document so you can calendar the dates and even calendaring in your Outlook, for example, like, hey, I'm going to follow up with so-and-so on such and such date, and telling the person like, hey, is it all right if I follow up with you in 2 to 4 weeks with an update, and following through and executing on what you said you were going to do. I think that counts for a lot too. It holds yourself accountable. So again, the burden is really on the person who is asking for advice and for help to stay on the other person's radar.
Yeah, I would say that what I do for certain people I meet is, obviously add them to my Outlook contacts, and then I'll have them, I'll type a bunch of notes about them, who they are, how I met them, what their interests are, and it's a little bit of effort. above and beyond just calendaring the time to follow up, but I kind of just, so for example, if I talk to someone and during the course of our initial meeting, I find out they're a basketball fan, well, okay, the NBA season might be starting soon, right? Which team do they like or whatever? And so I'll keep that in mind. And if their team beats whatever, say, okay, I will shoot an email to so-and-so, whatever, saying, hey, congrats on blah, 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 whatever. Little points, little touches that are kind of specific and remind them that you are thinking of them in a particular way rather than just generally following up. It takes a little bit more effort, but I've found it to be quite effective at making sure they remember you. So.
I absolutely agree. And I am the dork who shows my students my really embarrassing business card holder that on the back of those cards from people, it has the note on it of where I met them, including at my very first faculty conference ever, the very first other clinician that I met. And on the back, it says, like, literally ran into her at the hand drying station. That's how we met. And that has become our sort of running joke. And it's now been, 10 or 15 years. We've never worked together at the same place, but it's a point of connectivity that we joke about. But I know her husband works in tax, and I know all these little things about her. There can also be in the moment, I think, if you're connecting on Zoom, one of the immediate things that we do is we look to people's backgrounds to see, like, what can we know about them, etc. And you'd be surprised. The prints behind me are certainly a conversation point, and sometimes fun and sometimes more serious political discussion. But asking people about things and talking with them about things that are not specifically work related, right? Or, I love what Charles said about basketball. I went to Duke, I'm from Kentucky. I'm going to talk about basketball. There are just rules, right, in my life, like that. I'm just like required to know about basketball, and that conflict in my life about basketball. But even simple things. A good example would be the other day, we were on a call with our librarian and another faculty member, and he was drinking out of a Washington Huskies mug. And I said, nice mug, Matt. He's like, oh, it's where I did my library program. And suddenly that faculty member who was on the call said, oh, I did a library program at Washington too. And they've worked together. They've been here longer than I have. They've worked together for a number of years and they had no idea. So ways to also build connectivity so that also if I reached out to Charles and said, hey, I'm looking for another person who might be interested in LLM programming, right? Or who also has done a tax LLM, having them introduce you in a way that not only includes a work component, but includes something about you that's personal. Like, oh, you're going to totally love Charles. Like he's a huge basketball fan. Or you're going to love Dolores. She's like from Kentucky. Ask her about bourbon, like whatever. Finding ways to get that introduction or to connect with people on a level that isn't just about work or isn't connected to something that you need is really important. And I think Charles's point about, and just like Christina and Robin and I are talking about tracking your networking, this should actually be a part of your job. You should treat it as you would any other research that you did, right? Where you were tracking and documenting what you're doing. And same thing with that job search, right? This is where I look today. This is the search that I did. This is what I found. I think is really important, if for no other reason than you don't feel like you're just circling. And so also, so you feel like you have an element of control over that process.
Thanks, everyone. So we have a couple more minutes left that we'd like to reserve for our Q&A session. We have a couple questions from the audience. So we have a question asking about international students or maybe international attorneys. Are there any strategies or opinions or help that you could provide to those international employees who might need sponsorship during this time, and what they can do to either find a company or firm who will sponsor or have it secured for them? Because I know that's probably a big worry for them right now.
I thought I read recently, weren't work visa suspended for the rest of the year or something like that? Am I wrong? Yeah,
there was an executive order either yesterday or the day before, particularly focused on H-1B visa holders. So it looks like it, at least from the interpretations I'm reading, it impacts new sponsorships, but those who currently have them are in decent shape for at least right now. But yeah, that's a particularly rough situation right now. I think I would say too, with that, utilizing your university's International Student Center would be a great way to gain more information there on the front lines of that. I think even more so than most of the rest of us. I don't know that in the recruiter world, maybe there's more information specific to the employer side of things. But I would suggest anybody, particularly either recent grads or folks that are thinking about coming back to school, that situation is very volatile, and I would definitely check in with I would send people to my international student office.
I agree 100%. Also, update your materials if you can volunteer. Continue to get that practical legal experience that you need in the area that you're interested in. If there's nothing available, again, get those transferable skills.
Yeah, and one thing too we haven't really talked about, but I think we said it, and I heard it in Charles's introduction, and it made me think of it, is that if you are not finding what you want, maybe it is a time to consider school. If you've got the means, the ability, the access, et cetera, to do that, maybe it is a time to consider whether it's an LLM program or some other related or interdisciplinary program, or even a certificate from continuing education. Like we have on campus a division of continuing ed. There's other certificate programs. If you're already a lawyer, doing a specialist training, right? Getting that certification, getting certified in mediation, maybe school might be a way to kind of bridge that gap. And if you are an H-1B visa holder and you have the ability to transition to an F-1 or some other type of educational visa to be here for that, that might be something worth looking into and having that conversation with somebody beyond me, an immigration lawyer, the International Student Office, et cetera. That might be worthy of your time to think about whether that would extend your ability to be here in this country or to have access to some of what you need while we wait this out.
Yeah, there were certainly quite a few international students on a tax LLM program. I mean, a good number of them came direct from their respective hometowns, but a lot of them had been working or I think had been going to school in the United States and decided to do an extra year of school to extend their stay.
And I know we have a couple of attorneys who are in the audience right now who are probably curious to see what the market is for them to transition. Christina, in your line of work, how's the market for a transitioning attorney?
Are you talking about someone who wants to make a move laterally or?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so as I mentioned with the practice areas that I noted before, certain practice areas we anticipate will be hot or are already starting to be hot. So to the extent that you have experience in those areas, I mentioned bankruptcy, labor and employment, healthcare litigation, data privacy, IP, especially patent work. Sure, you want to leverage that experience to your advantage during this time. But if you find yourself kind of at a standstill, not knowing what to do, I would also encourage you to be flexible about potential opportunities. I know that we spoke about remote positions in the past. I would also encourage you to be flexible about geography. So like in 2019, we saw a 28% increase in relocations year over year. So some top relocation destinations were Houston, Denver, Charlotte. They have lower cost of living and hot industries. And then one other thing I wanted to bring to your all attention is considering and being flexible with respect to preferred JD Advantage positions. They've become more common in recent years, and half of startup corporate legal departments now have these type of jobs. They often fall under contracts administrator, legal operations, compliance, risk management, legal tech. They can be a pretty lucrative entrepreneurial and exciting career paths. And also just if you really know that you want to do corporate work and that's where you've been so far and you've seen like a slowdown in some corporate deal making activity, considering whether you can pivot and specialize a little bit more within corporate, for example. Like I spoke with an attorney who has been super busy with like real estate private equity funds work, and it's pretty specific under corporate, but he's stayed very busy during COVID. So you know, considering whether this is the time to figure out if you can specialize as well. I think that is my advice.
Yeah. Oh,
We're
sorry.
almost out of time, but we have a couple more questions. So if the panel doesn't mind staying for a little bit longer, okay. Sorry to cut you off, Charles.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, my first job after my tax LLM was not a lawyer job. It was with Bank of America's, they call it the Wealth Strategies Department, where we support our high net worth clients. And I was the first full-fledged attorney they hired for that position nationwide. Up until then, they'd been looking at 5 to 7 year finance professionals and whatnot. And my boss and her boss, they were all former big law attorneys that didn't want to bill hours anymore, so they transitioned, into the bank, the private bank. I was just doing things backwards because law firms weren't hiring in 2010. But that was an opportunity that kind of set me on this path where now I'm doing, estate planning at a large firm. So.
Thanks, Charles. And we have a question dealing with law school grading. There seems to be a shift to pass-fail. And so then that would definitely affect, GPAs and employers looking for certain GPAs. How can students who aren't in the top 20 of their class take advantage of these grading policies and kind of make their intent apparent to the potential employers?
That's the hot question right now in law schools. I think we've covered it. Really think about all of your transferable skills that you've gained. If you manage to get a position this summer, make sure that you utilize everything that you're doing there. Write down, and this is what I tell my students, while you're working, write down all of the things that you're doing. Keep a log of all of the tasks and responsibilities so that you can talk about them later, so that you can, when you have an interview, should you secure one, you can talk about that. Think about all of your accomplishments. Those are things that you can look at as well. If you're a member of a student organization, think about what you've done through that student organization. If you have a chance to become a research assistant, look at how you have worked for those professors and all the things that you've done. If you've researched specific practice areas, cutting edge legal issues, those are things that you can put on your resume as well. You don't have to be in the top 20% of the class. If we have law schools that are employing people at 80, 90%, 60 to 70% of the people or 80% of the people are not in the top of their class. So you still can get jobs and you can get great jobs. You just have to think about your background and apply it to the positions that you're working or that you're applying to.
Yeah, I agree. And I would also add that we have to think about your application packet as a whole. So we've talked a little bit about cover letters and resumes and how to reflect those skills and those pieces. But for example, I know our students talk a lot about the pass-fail really impacted them because if they were in a clinic during that semester, right, where we've gone pass-fail, or even going into the fall, if that's what schools end up doing, think about who you want to choose or list as a reference and what they can actually talk about or speak to. So, and you may want to shift up your references depending on the job. So if you would have done really well in that tax class you took, but now it's just a pass, right? Maybe you want to list that tax professor. Maybe you wouldn't have necessarily listed them specifically, but now you do. Maybe ask them for an email, a paragraph describing all of your participation, how great your paper was, how fabulous you're clearly very knowledgeable about that arena. For things like clinic and externship, same thing. Get those professors to write something more detailed about that specific experience with you. Maybe it's not a full reference letter, it's just something detailing what you did or what they know about you in that experience. And the same thing is, I agree with Robin, you're gonna have to be thoughtful about how you're highlighting what you know and what you did in a different way, since the grades won't be speaking for you. So maybe that's a different type of paragraph or approach in a cover letter. Maybe it's a different choice in writing sample. And like I said, maybe it's a different reference or additional references than you would normally offer. Maybe it's something that you put in an email that is, here's my materials attached, and I particularly want to highlight this experience or this thing. I'd also say that at least what we're hearing and the feedback we're getting is just like Charles and Christina and everybody has said about 2008, it's all happening. This is not a secret. This is not something bad that just happened to you. Everybody knows that this time frame, that's why it's pass fail. That's why you don't have that GPA. I'd say own it. And again, just gather as much evidence of your abilities and capabilities and skills as you can, which is good advice regardless, but probably particularly good right now. And you can utilize your LinkedIn profile to do that as well, to highlight skills, have people have folks put recommendations on, and maybe that's not something you would have done before. Now would be a great time.
I agree. Utilizing LinkedIn appropriately and properly is, to me, the gift that keeps on giving. We all know about search engine optimization, right? We know that there are different, there are phrases and words that you can put on your LinkedIn page that will direct a search to you. So make sure that you review it. Make sure that it's a 3D example of who you are. You can put on your LinkedIn page so much more that you can put on a resume. A resume is one 2D document that is usually one page for law students. LinkedIn, you can go all the way back to your high school volunteering if that makes you happy, right? These are all things that can help you. I saw the other day, one of my connections was looking for a position. And this was just somebody in the IP field. He was looking for a position, and he just said, I've been looking for a position. Here's my information. If anybody knows anybody, let me know. I'm not kidding you. Within 2 hours, there were already 4 people who responded and said, hey, send me your stuff. Let's see what we can do. So we've talked about reaching out to people that you know. We've talked about, making sure that LinkedIn page is correct. We've talked about thinking, and I think this all has to do with some really good self-reflection and what makes you different and what makes you you. How has your experience up until now been different than everyone else's? And write to that. Also, your career services office is a great place to start. I've reviewed LinkedIn profiles before, and I'm sure your advisors would be happy to sit down with you to see how you can maximize LinkedIn for your benefit.
And to Christina's point earlier about setting an agenda, if you friend or connect to a faculty member or to one of us or whatever it is on LinkedIn or something like that, whatever platform, send a message that says, hey, I'd love to connect with you, but if you have any feedback on my page or my profile, I'd love to hear it, right? We're happy to do that. And with our tax LLMs at UCI, for example, we actually do that as a part of our careers workshop. We have all of them connect to all of our tax faculty, and we actually go through and give them feedback on their LinkedIn profile. What should they change? What should they add? And again, once they connect to us, then we can tag them and stuff, right? And put them out to our networks in a way that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So that is a professional network. It is not Facebook. It's not Insta. It's not Snapchat. Go ahead and friend your faculty, right? On LinkedIn, find them, administrators, etc. And then when they do something great, share their news. I think this is also a good time to remind you that while you might be going through some stuff and you're struggling, highlight and amplify other people's voices and other people's news. That stuff's going to come around back to you as well when it's your turn, right? To be in that spotlight. And I think people remember who supported them, who amplified, who did those things. It's just a really good time to do that. And it also, I think, helps bring you some joy as well.
Is it fair to say that we'll all be expecting some connections after LinkedIn connections after the
just
channel?
scanning the participant list right now and looking for some of my students to know who I was going to who should I get requests from. But yeah, I hope so.
Well, thanks, Erin. Looks like we're out of time. We weren't able to answer some questions, so I would encourage the audience members to reach out and email me or the rest of the pipeline committee. You can find our information on the OCABA website. The OCABA website is OCABA, that's OCAABA.org, and under the pipeline committee. And we have all our contact information there. And then we'll forward some of the questions that you have over to our panelists. And even if you didn't have an opportunity to ask or just couldn't think of any questions, go ahead and just email us. But again, I'd like to thank the panelists for taking their time out of their day, probably their lunch, to go ahead and educate us on the type of job markets there are there and a lot of tips of trying to secure some future jobs. So again, thank you. And I hope everyone enjoyed, and we are definitely gonna continue the discussion offline, and you could do so via emails, like I said. And again, the website is ocava.org, and that's OCAAVA.org. Well, thank you again, and hope to talk to you guys soon.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.